My clock shows 11 a.m., so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to the second installment in our Older Adults Do Meditate, a Guide to Contemplation with Older Adults webinar series. My name is Britt Detain, and I am the Senior Marketing Associate with the National Benevolent Association. The NBA is the Health and Social Service Ministry partner of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and we collaborate with leaders and with health and social service organizations to strengthen and transform communities through compassion, healing, and justice. For all of you who are returning from last week, we're glad to see you once again, and we're glad you're here. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're really glad that you were able to join us today. And if you'd like to catch up on the series, last week's webinar is now available on NBA's YouTube page. The link to the page will be posted in the chat here shortly for you if you'd like to go back and catch up, or perhaps even share with others who you think might benefit from our discussion and time together. So a couple quick notes before we get started here that I want to pass along. As I just mentioned a little bit earlier, this is the second webinar of the series, and we'll have additional webinars taking place on February 19th and February 26th. So that's a week from today and 2 weeks from today. Each of those will be at the same time as this one, noon Eastern, 11 Central, and the same Zoom link that you use to get to today's webinar will also allow you to get to both of those as well. You should see a reminder email coming through ahead of those in your email box as well. So additionally, I want to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded. So you can turn off your camera or you can keep it on, doesn't matter to us, but just keep in mind that we are recording that session. Later on, we will have a breakout room session. And so during that time, we encourage you to turn your camera on for that time as you take place in the discussion there. We do ask, though, that you just double check real quick to make sure that your microphone is on mute so that we can hear our speakers as they talk to us today. So at this point, again, welcome, and I will turn it over to Reverend Paul Koch, who will get us started today. Paul?
All right, thank you, Britt, and welcome back, friends, and a special welcome to those who have joined us for the first time today. And last week, as you'll find on the recording, we spent about a half hour kind of unpacking what it means to meditate or to enter into contemplation. And I'll provide another synonym of what we're doing, and that's that we are being mystics. Sometimes that sounds frightening if we believe that we are entering into the realm of mysticism, but I want to assure you that this is altogether who we are and part of we are called to do and be as a person of faith. And I want to share what I found to be a very accessible quote from Howard Thurman that Jan ended us with last week. Indeed, contemporary 20th century mystic that has informed us in so many remarkable ways. But Howard Thurman writes, "The claim of the mystic is, at last, that you don't need anything to bring you to God. You don't need a mediator. You don't need an institution. You don't need a ceremony or ritual. God is in me, and the ladder from the earth to sky is available. So I can ascend my own altar stairs wherever I am, under any circumstance. And the key to understanding of the experience and the experience itself is never in the hands of any other human being. When I love people, then I find God in me. Whether I bow my knee at any altar doesn't make any difference. The God in me begins to move up through the corridors of my mind and my emotions, and moves out from me and broods over you." So clearly, as disciples of Christ, we have the freedom to see the Christ in each other and the God in each other. And so there really is no wrong way to enter into one's relationship with God. And I'm sure in many ways you are already a meditator, you're already a contemplative, and you are already a mystic in ways that you have found forming your faith throughout many years. You know, such as me, I always like to arrive in the sanctuary early and to hear the organist or the musicians practice. So I could just listen to the music that's being played, or if it's just me, the silence speaks to me in volumes. And so I think that's all three boxes: contemplative, entering to meditation, and mysticism, as I feel God presence in that huge immense space. So we want to create some time for you to share what has been kind of a favorite meditation or contemplative practice that you have found useful. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and shout it out.
I like to use scripture meditations, like, and breathe in, the Lord is my light and my salvation, and then breathe out, whom then should I fear? Those kind of things. Psalms are very useful for that, I find.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jerry.
I've spent my whole life making music, and especially the times that I'm practicing on my own, that always has a meditative quality to it. Shut down the outside world and focus on the sound of that moment and that time and space.
I tend to journal as I meditate. That's one of the things. And this year, there was a suggestion in a book that I was using that that you consider using the lectionary readings for the week as part of your daily devotion. And so rather than using a devotional guide, other than that, I've been using the lectionary readings. And then, so reading, which means there's 4 readings in a week, which means I don't use that as my everyday thing. I use other things as well. But the 4 days that I do that, using that, and then responding to it in my journal. And maintaining a separate journal for that. I tend to maintain separate journals for different things. And so that one this year is my set. And some weeks you end up with more than one set of readings, because there are other days that are included besides Sunday. So last week there was the presentation of Jesus in the temple for his mother's rite of purification, and that was an interesting thing to compare the weekly lectionary readings with those readings. And some of them sort of tied together and some of them were totally different, but it was interesting to do that. So that means that I'm reading at least one psalm during the week, at least something from the Old Testament, usually something from the epistles, and of course a gospel reading. And that works out well for doing it for journaling.
Well, thank you, Margaret, and others. That sounds very disciplined. And a lot of times you hear the word spiritual discipline. So it does take discipline, but it becomes a rhythm, it becomes a pattern. So I appreciate that incredible observation. And but Thomas Merton kind of indicated if it doesn't bring, well, let me rephrase that. That you're drawn closer to God if you feel an immense love being drawn to other people through your practice. And Teresa and we have a common hospice patient, and I saw him yesterday, Teresa, with him and his son, and I just felt God just so full in the room, just for us sharing in that sacred moment of the three of us. And indeed, that's a spiritual discipline too, intentionally visiting someone who is sick or transitioning, and those who care and love for them too. So we'll be able to explore more in our breakout groups, but today, very happy to pass it over to Kimberly Weir, who's going to enlighten us even more, and using scripture, the fruits of the Spirit, to help us understand particular ways. So thank you so much. And thank you, Kimberly. Welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you all. It's great to see you all again this week. Just a little bit about who I am and how I came to this. I am the chaplain and executive director of the Florida Senior Enrichment Center, formerly the Florida Christian Center. We have been a ministry of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ for 103 years. And I'm on a campus with about 300 residents of independent living apartments. And it's subsidized housing. So it's low income, independent living, about 300 people. And then I'm in an activity building. So we have a large auditorium and a chapel, and space for other things as well. So we're kind of like the community center of our campus. So I tell you that to also say that on Tuesdays, every Tuesday, we have a prayer time. It's a 15-minute just bringing joys, bringing concerns, praying for each other. And we usually end with a chorus of a hymn or a song. When I attended a previous webinar led by Paul and Jan, Paul introduced the looking for God over your shoulder. The devotion that was used, the reflection that was used last week came out of this booklet that you all can access through the NBA website, Looking for God Over Your Shoulder. So I attended this webinar and Paul led it, and we were studying scripture. We were looking at the scripture. We were reflecting and conversing about that. And I wanted to bring that to our weekly prayer group. So we kind of extended our prayer time and started working through this amazing booklet that has the reflections that Paul was sharing. And we finished, and we were like, the residents were, we want to keep doing this. We don't want to stop reflecting more deeply about these scriptures. So they decided that, well, why don't we come up with our own booklet? Why don't we create a devotional, reflective, using the same format? So that is exactly what they did. So they created, we decided, I had preached about the fruits of the Spirit. So we had decided, well, let's do a reflection on each of the fruits of the Spirit. So that, thank you, Tech. So that is exactly what we did. So this is the front cover of our little booklet. And each week, a different resident created the reflection. And if the person needed some help, maybe this isn't something they were used to doing, the resident would come and sit with me and we would talk through it. And we would talk through the scripture. We would talk through other scriptures that it reminded them of. We would work through some reflection questions. So it just was an amazing opportunity for our residents who were, one, searching for something deeper, and then two, to be able to sit down with them one-on-one to create that reflection for the next week. Just became a really rich time for me as the chaplain with that particular resident. So as we did this, I just was increasingly amazed at the depth of the conversation that we were having. I would say there were probably anywhere from 8 to 12 people in the group each week, just for kind of a size reference. The residents were sharing openly. They were being vulnerable with each other. They were definitely interested in continuing. So after we got through the fruits of the Spirit, we then decided to pick up another theme and have created another booklet on the everyday miracles of Jesus. So what I'd like to do with is to have us experience one of those reflections that was written by one of our residents. It was the fruit of the Spirit of patience. How many of you love the fruit of the Spirit of patience? Not my favorite word, but certainly one of those fruits that we try to cultivate as Christians, especially as Christian mystics, as Paul said. So I want to show the scripture to you now, and the scripture and the questions will be in the chat when we get to that breakout session in a moment. But here is that scripture. We always start at the top with a picture. So the resident has fun finding a picture. Sometimes they're landscapes, sometimes they're personal pictures, but this particular resident found this little meme that says, "Lord, please give me patience, because if you give me strength, I'll need bail money too." So this was this resident's way of introducing the topic. And of course, the scripture is Psalm 27, verse 1, and then 8 through 13. If it's okay, I'll just read that scripture, and then we can go into our breakout sessions as we consider the reflection questions. So the scripture reads, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom should I dread? When you said, 'Seek my face,' my heart said to you, 'I shall seek your face, Lord.' Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not abandon me nor forsake me, God of my salvation. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me up. Teach me your way, Lord, and lead me on a level path because of mine enemies. Do not turn me over to the desires of my enemies, for false witnesses have risen against me, and the violent witness. I certainly believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." So that is our scripture to consider. And as we go into our breakout groups, each group will have kind of a facilitator to keep the group moving through the discussion. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts after we rejoin after the breakout sessions. It's good to see you back. I don't know if this happened in your breakout session, but we kind of don't necessarily always go exactly with the questions that are listed, that they kind of can take on a direction or life of their own. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Um, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, so I like have a tendency to want to, okay, I want to follow the rules and go through each one. But that's when you're dealing with contemplation and meditation, you just kind of learn to kind of go with where the conversation goes. So I guess I'd like to ask just the larger group if there's something that struck you about your conversation, something that was helpful or unique or impactful. I'd love to invite you to share what that might have been.
James talked about his chocolate lab, and in his still photo, we get to see her or him. Still a puppy, still rambunctious, and sometimes our minds are like a chocolate lab. One thing to the next. Can we ever calm down? But oh, I know my life would be considerably empty if I didn't have a little dog with me to remind me of what's important.
Awesome. That's great. Anybody else have a moment or thought or?
Our group talked a pretty long time about the relationship of patience with anger and how much that bubbles up when I'm not using my patience and how much that hurts me when it doesn't really have any impact on the person I'm being impatient with. Yeah. And being cognizant of what am I doing to myself and my mental and physical health when I'm not being patient.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Who else would like to share what stuck out to them? Well, I know. I'm sorry, go ahead.
With our group, Kimberly, I will share that what I've shared with the group, that for me over the years, I'm 83, and so I am one of the seniors of our congregation, and I am an elder apprentice, because I certainly don't know technology, but I have been involved enough with the 12-step programs to know that the Serenity Prayer is one of the patient anchoring for me. And the fact of using 24 hours for major decisions, God comes in, the Spirit comes in, something comes in between when the situation I'm faced with and the decision to where to go from there. So again, it's the serenity and deep breaths, the in breath, out breath, and of course, doing daily meditations with Richard Rohr and looking beyond ourselves at the bigger world that God has. It's God's world, and we need to. I believe we need to have the love going through not only our sacred part of us, but the secular world too, and which is right now crazy blessed. from my perspective.
Thanks, Jane. And Jane was part of the group that I was in. And what I thought was interesting is that out of the group, it wasn't like a direct question, but all these tips and suggestions and ways to be patient came out of the conversation. So we got a chance to talk about all the things that we are impatient about and how that affects us. But out of that came, just like Jane said, she uses the serenity prayer. Someone else talked about taking deep breaths. Someone else talked about slowing down, like physically when you're driving on the road, slowing down. The waiting 24 hours before responding to something, focusing on what the goal is in the moment, and talking to a friend. When you're trying to be patient, a friend can, I think we use the expression, talk you down off the ledge, so to speak. So anyway, it was just a really rich conversation. I hope all of your conversations had nuggets of things that might have been helpful. I'd like to just ask, because in the next week, we will do something a little different from what we've done this week. Do you think this is the type of tool that you can use in your setting? Is it something that perhaps your small group or your older adult group, a Sunday school class, a Bible study class, is this kind of format something that you think you could adopt for your group, where people contribute? Just a curiosity question on my part.
I'm not currently part of a particular group that I would use this with. But I can see this being something that I would enjoy doing. I can see this even being something that a small group might do, not necessarily in person, but doing it online like this could be something that would be really helpful with older adults who are not feeling like they can get out and go a whole lot, but they would like to be able to spend some time studying together, and something of this type might be really useful.
Thanks, Margaret. Great.
And I'm sort of thinking in terms of where we might use that in our region, for example.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And Margaret, you talked about journaling earlier. This is also something that certainly, if other people who want to create could create but it could be used by oneself, right? If the resource that's currently out there, I mean, this booklet, the Looking Over Your Shoulder booklets, are currently out there on the NBA website under the Older Adult Resources tab. And certainly somebody who wanted to journal or just one-on-one with another person could use this as well, perhaps. What do you all think?
I appreciate what you did, Kimberly, because they're open-ended questions, so they will come from my heart. How I respond. It's not like a quiz, did I follow the scripture carefully, or, fill in the blank, something that you should have learned, because my mind is just wanting to shut down many times, because it can override the heart. And so just grateful, for the deep sharing that these prompts evoked.
Thank you. That's great. Well, and it's interesting. I'm sorry.
We're adding that text. It's titled "Looking for God Over Your Shoulder." Can we get that through Chalice Press, or where do we actually find that?
It is on the NBA Older Adult Resource page, and I'm sure the NBA Tech can put the link in our chat again, so that you can access it that way. Another interesting component or piece is that there are some people who have very different thoughts and ideas. So as the residents sit with me and we create the reflections, you learn a lot about someone, and it may be that they have an idea or a thought to present that's quite different from others, which can generate a beautiful discussion as well. Anyway, just throwing that out there. Any other thoughts or comments about this time together today and the booklet?
Our church doesn't have a well-formed older group, but we have a number of older people in our church that I might present this to and see if there's any interest.
Awesome. That's great. And if there's a certain sermon series that's, your pastor is doing or that you're doing as a clergy or lay leader, maybe there's an opportunity to tie in your meditations and reflections with what your church is already focused on through the preaching or teaching.
We welcome if your church has developed, a series, some of you preachers who write your own curricula for Sunday school or sermon series. Yeah, if you put together on print, please send it to us and we'll add it to the resource list or be happy to edit with you the finished product that we think people will enjoy. So yeah, we're by no means the experts on any of this. We're just contributors. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Jerry, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm looking at this kind of thing, what we talked about today, and I have an older adult Bible study group that meets on Tuesday mornings right now, and it's predominantly made up of widows, and we've had a lot of fun. We've gone through the Psalms. They wanted to study the only 2 books in the Bible that had a woman's name on them, so we did Ruth and Esther, of course, and we've done a number of things. But I'm thinking that group might really enjoy some of this time, even just along with our Bible study time, to just have some time to reflect and really focus. So I appreciate this.
Awesome, Jerry. That's great to hear. Thank you.
I especially like your idea, Kimberly, of having the participants put something together. There's so much wisdom and so much experience that folks have that can be shared, and I think it's wonderful to be able to tap into that. So thank you.
You're welcome. And it's such a good point about part of our older adult ministry group, one of our goals and objectives is to make sure to utilize the gifts and wisdom of our older adults and to help them to feel connected and valued, and that their contributions matter. And I certainly have learned and grown and feel like my spiritual life is richer because of their wisdom and what they've shared. So thank you, Candace. Very good. Thank you again. I'm going to turn it over to Jan to wrap us up and close us out.
Thank you all for being with us today, and especially thank you to Kimberly and also to Paul for your leadership and thoughtfulness in creating this together. As we have a final moment in a way of closure, I'd like to reread just a few of the sections of our scripture passage for today. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom should I dread? And do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not abandon me or forsake me, God of my salvation. Teach me your way. Lead me on a level path. I certainly believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. As you practice the challenge of patience this week or even this day, perhaps you'll recall some of the conversation you had in this hour, recognizing some of the lessons learned, the gifts received, the value in having to wait, and the value of allowing God to lead you instead of being in your own space of control. We wish you blessings as well as thoughts and practices this week as you recall these scripture passages and the conversations that we've had, the blessing of being together. We look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday, same time, same link, and you'll receive a reminder too. Blessings all. Bye-bye.